China, in the meantime, is stepping up the rhetoric on Doklam and has once again called for immediate and unconditional withdrawal of Indian troops from the region. Chinese experts and officials have also indicated that a small-scale military operation to remove the Indian troops is possible within 2 weeks. The Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson said, I quote, China urged India to immediately pull back the trespassing troops to the Indian side of the boundary and called on them to swiftly address the situation in a proper manner to restore peace and tranquility in the border region. End quote. However, India's External Affairs Minister said that war was not a solution. China has said that India has adopted an immature policy toward the country in recent years. Reports suggest that the Chinese Foreign Minister has said that China had notified India about roadworks through the border meeting mechanism on both May 18th and June 9th, but added that India didn't respond. Chinese officials have also been quoted as saying that diplomatic conversations are failing to resolve the issue. Earlier, though, the Chinese Consul General Ma Zhanwu had emphasized the importance of a cultural exchange between the countries, while the Indian External Affairs Ministry spokesperson refused to confirm or deny the news of troop reduction by India at the Tri-Junction. The Chinese Consul General, who was in Kolkata, emphasized the importance of trade and cultural exchanges between the two Asian giants. He added that peace and tranquility along the border are valuable to both countries and that they should focus on areas of shared interest. Mr. Zhanwu also expressed hope that the current situation would be dealt with in a rational, objective and constructive way so that the issue could be sorted out as soon as possible. However, he refrained from responding to questions on the border standoff.
On the whole, the exchanges and cooperation between China and India would contribute to the overall atmosphere of the relationship and would also, in the long run, contribute to the solving of the problems that could exist between India and China. And so in this regard, we hope to advocate more exchanges in cultural, in educational, in trade, and financing, and other tourism and other areas.
China carried out a military drill close to India's border last week, moving tons of combat vehicles and lethal weapons into the area.
We urge again that the Indian side should stick to our historic deals on borders, respect China's territorial sovereignty, and withdraw the troops.
China's state-run media is speculating an all-out war. So what's behind this aggression? The two nuclear-armed neighbours have been caught in border disputes for several decades. They even fought in a war in 1962. The Chinese army crossed over into India-held disputed territories several times in the past few years. There was never any armed violence, but there's been some arm wrestling and grabbing. And it's not just border issues. China finds India hostile on many fronts. India supports a separatist movement in Chinese-controlled Tibet, giving shelter to Tibetan refugees and their leader, Dalai Lama, since 1959. The country also opposes China's growing presence in the South China Sea, siding with Washington and its allies. In return, China blocked India's entry into the nuclear suppliers group in May, striking a major blow to India's geopolitical aspirations. India refused to participate in the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a road network aimed at enhancing China's trade reach to the Middle East and Europe. But it doesn't stop there. India recently made a new move in Bhutan, further estranging itself from China. Bhutan, a tiny kingdom between India and China, has its own territorial disputes with Beijing. India dispatched its army to Doklam, a disputed region between Bhutan and Beijing, after the Bhutanese kingdom sought help from New Delhi in June. India's foreign minister claims China's presence in Doklam is a military threat to India. Since then, the Chinese government has taken a hawkish stance against India, and India isn't willing to budge either. Are the two countries really on the brink of war, or are they just flexing their muscles to gain regional superiority? Only time will tell.
Should there be border tensions between China and India in the current place? Let me go to you, Mr. Aneja, first from India.
Well, there should not be border tensions at all between India and China. because the agenda of India and China as emerging economy is much bigger than just being locked up in a border standoff. So it should not take place at all, the border tensions. But in the specific area, why it has taken place, now there are two narratives here. There is an Indian narrative which talks about the change of status quo by China pending a resolution. This is in accordance with the 2012 agreement. Whereas we do have a Chinese narrative which is completely to the opposite. So we have competing narratives right now on why it took place. But the point really now is that it's time that this disengagement takes place over here, and it takes place on terms which are honorable to both countries.
Right. Should there be a tension between China and India? Are the two countries the parties that really should be involved in this so-called border tension?
I think Indian border troops crossing of China Indian border in Sikkim sector is going to damage everything, damage whatever, all the efforts we have made over the 20 or 30 years. Since 1988, when Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi visited Beijing, Indian-China relations have been improving. But suddenly, Indian border troops crossed the border and entered in China territory, and until now they are still there. I think that is a very serious incident. I think it is going to damage everything. So I think the better solution for India to withdraw its troops. After that, we can talk about what we are going to talk.
Okay,
here.
Let me go to you, Mr. Aneja from India. Why do you think, of course you're a journalist, you are not a military official.
Sure.
Neither is Senior Colonel Zhao. Even though he has a title, he is more a researcher in the military.
Yeah.
So let me ask both of you as researchers, why do you think, Mr. Aneja, India did so?
Well, as I said, that there was a certain understanding between the special representatives of India and China in 2012 that pending a final resolution on specific areas in the Sikkim section, and that specific area is really the Tri-Junction area. Now, the Tri-Junction area also needs to be resolved, that is the alignment of the Tri-Junction by all the three countries, which would mean China, India and Bhutan. But we were not there right now. But pending that, neither side should change the status quo. Now, the Indian narrative is that the status quo was changed by China when it started building the road in the Tri-Junction area. And second point is that this area was a disputed territory between China and Bhutan, with which India has a defense treaty arrangement. And since the demarche of the Bhutanese, which took place in around 20th of June, it does talk about its protest about this. So there is this trilateralism to this entire situation.
Got you. Let me go to some of the points that you raised with the Senior Colonel Zhao. First of all, the three parties that Mr. Aneja mentioned. It should be resolved with three parties, and that was the status quo.
Just a couple of points I'm going to respond to what he mentioned. First, he talked about the 2012 special representatives of the discussion. My understanding, that is, China and tries to renew the convention, Great Britain and China on the relating to Sikkim and Tibet, the convention, China to review it, because it was a convention between Great Britain and China. And since India got independent, and so many decades, China tried to reach an agreement between China and India, and for the border, that is a delimited border, and China don't think that is a disputed border. That is the first point. And the second point about the Tri-Junction he mentioned, I think the Tri-Junction according to based on the convention, the
Right.
Trans-junction is the Mount
Gipmochi.
Gip-
Gipmochi.
Kibumochi, right, Mount Kibumochi.
English name tends
And,
to be a little bit
yeah,
difficult.
That is a point. And the place Indian border troops crossed, that is 2 kilometers north of the Trans-junction.
Right.
So the place the Indian crossed, that is not a disputed area. That is China's territory. That is the Donglang or Doklam region, as you called it. So that is not a dispute.
So what you're saying is from one point to to a area that is not exactly what China is looking at,
Yeah,
right?
trying to look at it, the junction, that is a point, not an area.
All right, let's have Mr. Neja to respond to that.
Now, it's very interesting that when we're talking of a point, it's not a geometrical point on a paper. It is a feature. It's something on the ground. Now, what is the dimensions of a trijunction? That does it have a trijunction have a certain area, or
Do you think?
I think it should have a certain area. It should have certain coordinates. It should have a certain area. I do believe that nobody has gone into those details to actually define that what would be the parameters of the trijunction.
Is China changing the status quo?
Can I just complete
Yeah,
for
okay.
just quickly for a second? The Chinese position, which I'm well aware, and all of us are, that's 2,000 meters north, which is 2 kilometers north. I'm not aware what would be the dimensions of the trijunction. Would it spread to an area of 2 kilometers? Not too much. How much is the area covered by the trijunction? Those are the details we don't know about at this point in time.
And yet at this point, India is there, even though without knowing the details.
Well, this is the Indian argument, which I can say, is that because the trijunction is still yet to be resolved, any entry or any change of the status quo, which is building the road, is therefore not in sync with the 2012 agreement.
Yeah, so if Indian troops is in that so-called trijunction, is that going to be a change of the status quo compared to earlier times?
Well, Indian troops in the trijunction area at this point in time, it just shows that it is time that we actually start talking about defining trijunctions and actually implementing the understanding of the
All right.
watershed principle defined by the 1890
Okay,
treaty.
Mr. Zhao, Senior Colonel Zhao, your response to the so-called status quo issue.
I just have a word about the trijunction. The trijunction was determined by the convention in 1890. So over the past 100 years, more than 100 years, each Indian government recognizes it. And they view as the border, the trijunction as the starting point of the border, the eastern point of the border. And they recognize it, but only this government, the Modi government, he tries to change it. That is about the trijunction. And I'd like to talk about the status quo.
So China was appalled by that.
Yeah. You know, China was building roads in its territory.
Roads.
And, you know, China tried to improve transportation in this area. Is it a change of status quo?
That's the whole point. Sorry,
Yeah. As far as I know, you know, India has, you know, constructed so many roads, railways on the Indian side of the border, either in Sikkim or in the so-called Arunachal Pradesh.
All right. Before we throw in a lot of geographical terms, because the audience might not necessarily familiar with every one of them,
Yeah.
but let me just let you, Mr. Aneja, to respond to that as well. Did India, according to Mr. Zhao, change the status quo already over the past few decades by building so-called roads and also transportation means on the other side of the so-called border?
Well, the point is that we are looking at a practical situation.
No, please answer my question
Yeah.
directly before we go to the solutions, okay? So what is the status quo for everybody? The status quo was 1890 or the status quo was 2012? And since 2012, how many people, how many things have changed on the so-called Chinese side of the border, on the so-called Indian side of the border? Let's just answer that question directly.
I think it's plenty has changed on both sides of the border.
Yeah, so which changed first?
Well, the point is that Chinese have been doing a lot of construction activity in Tibet. We are not objecting to that, because that is not happening in this disputed particular areas. We have the entire road coming from Lhasa down up to Yadon.
So what is your point?
So my point is that similarly there is a lot of construction which has been done in states of Assam and northeast India as well.
Okay.
So these constructions have been going on as a part of a natural normal process.
All right. Mr. Zhao.
I think China has the right to construct the road in Tibet, because it is within its sovereignty.
That's precisely the
It's
point.
like building roads in Beijing, right?
Does it have anything to do with India?
Similarly, India is constructing in areas where it exercises its sovereignty.
Yeah.
So
And
where is the problem?
no,
The
I-
problem is really when it comes
Okay.
to the specific areas of the boundary alignment.
All right. Respond, please.
I think the fact is very clear. The Donglang area is a part of China, a part of Tibet. And India recognizes it. India has been recognizing it for more than 100 years. And now, Indian border troops crossed the border and entered China's territory, and they are still there. It not only changed the status quo, but also I think it is a great challenge or threat to China's sovereignty, to China's security, and to China's territorial integrity.
All right. Okay, let's just give it a break because I need to give some background information to our audience worldwide about exactly what these two gentlemen are talking about. You know, there are very complicated geographical issues over here. The boundary that they have been talking about in the Sikkim sector has long been delimited by the 1890 convention, which was signed between then the Qing dynasty from China and Great Britain, which was the time, you know, in control of India. After independence, India inherited this historical convention, and successive Indian governments, as the Chinese guest mentioned, have repeatedly confirmed it in the official documents, as you can see over here. In the year 1996, both sides signed an agreement on confidence-building measures in the military field along the line of actual control in the India-China border areas, agreeing as no activities of either side shall overstep the line of actual control. End of quote. That's just some background to our audience worldwide about what you exactly talk about. Now, there's another issue needs to be mentioned here. That is, what exactly is the relationship between India and Bhutan, and also between China and Bhutan about that specific area that is in controversy right now? Let's go with Senior Colonel Zhao this time first.
Yeah. China doesn't have diplomatic relations with Bhutan, but China have connections with Bhutan, and over the past years, 24 rounds of bilateral talks on the border issues or various issues has been going on,
including this area.
Including this area, and Bhutan has never said that is a part of Bhutan. I mean the Donglang area.
Because it's under discussion.
He admits that is a part of China.
All right.
So Donglang area has never been a disputed area between China and Bhutan.
So this is the issue between China and Bhutan, or between China and India, or actually between China and nobody?
Between China and nobody.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
No,
Let's go
I
to
just
Mr.
have
Aneja.
I have to respond to this.
Yeah.
The Doklam issue is a dispute between the Bhutanese and the Chinese side. It is an area of dispute. The discussions.
Why do you say so?
Because it has been part of their rounds of discussions, as he rightly said. It starts in 1984.
But
right?
he also said that there's no conflict between the two countries.
The ambassador, the Bhutanese ambassador in New Delhi, has said publicly that this area, Doklam area, is a disputed area between China and Bhutan. So, and that is also a part of the démarche which takes place from the Bhutanese side to the Chinese side.
And why is India there?
Now, India has there's two things. That India has inherited a treaty, which was 1949 treaty, where the defense of Bhutan was the responsibility of India.
Okay, but
right?
there's a treaty,
And
you said.
1949 treaty
Yeah.
was replaced by another treaty in 2007, which again has a security clause.
Okay, that's
and
one
so
thing.
Therefore, if there is any problem which the Bhutanese have in terms of their security, India is an automatic party which gets funnels into it because of the treaty obligations.
Okay. That's the most important thing according to you. Okay, Mr. Senior Colonel Zhao, would you like to respond to that? There was a treaty and India was supposed to be there.
You know, first, you know, there is no dispute between China and Bhutan on the Donglang area. The border shared by China and Bhutan has not been finalized, but the two sides have a general consensus on the the border issue, and it is not including the Donglang area.
Okay,
that is
and
the
how
first
about
point.
all right?
And the second point, even if there is some problem between China and Bhutan, that is something between China and Bhutan. These issues should be resolved bilaterally. It has nothing to do with India. You know, because Bhutan is an independent, sovereign country. How can the third party get involved?
Okay, but Mr. Aneja was talking about the 1949 treaty and then the 2007 treaty. Help us understand better about how you see these treaties.
And there may be some treaties between India and Bhutan. That is something between the India and Bhutan. And now we are talking about, you know, the territorial dispute. If there is something, you know, some third party get involved, and on behalf of another country, and you know, in modern, in contemporary world, we cannot believe that. If it happened in 18th century, 19th century, I understand it. But in the 21st century, I cannot understand it.
Did Bhutan call for the help of India officially?
Of course,
Mr. Aneja, what is the sign of the call?
Look, I am not privy to the internal communication whether there
But
was
that should be public, right?
That's up to the government of India to
That should be
declassify it
public
as
rather
and
than
when.
private.
But I do think that when we will talk about the resolution of this issue will obviously come in whether what kind of communication was there from the Bhutanese side. But this is the official communication. It
But
may
the
be a
Bhutanese
fact.
side's attitude is extremely important in this case, isn't it?
And I think we should also respect Bhutan as a sovereign country here. And its
But also,
attitude.
Senior Colonel Zhao said that was China's territory originally.
Well, that is
to begin with.
Bhutanese don't think so.
All right,
yeah.
Mr. Senior Colonel
I
Zhao.
think if he is right, we can just imagine someday Chinese troops will go to Kashmir area on behalf of Pakistan, and so that we both between China and Pakistan we have an agreement, and China have the right to get involved. Do you agree with that?
Wow, oh my God, that's a chain reaction. We're going to go over there. We're going to have the third party country going into another country, so-called on behalf of that country.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be, we all have those stories in our neighborhood.
Absolutely, and we need to get out of this syndrome because as I said right in the beginning of the program that there has to be honorable disengagement from this issue because we don't, otherwise it starts a chain reaction.
We have
and there are three nuclear powers. We're talking of Pakistan as well, in just now. So we can't have this situation. We have to go step back from here and move into a positive direction.
But Bhutan is not a nuclear power. We're talking about the borders between so final words from you, since Mr. Aneja already got his final word. Final words from you, very briefly, Mr. Senior Colonel Zhao.
Yes, I think the Indian border troops entered China illegally. That is a fact, and it is quite clear. And now, India better pull back its troops. Okay. I think that is the prerequisite of any solution.
All right.